This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name is Evan Jansen. The show is live. It's broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now with our entire show available on our YouTube channel on demand. Now on the show today, we look at the crisis with owls here in Johannesburg following the killing of several of them after they were released to deal with the rat infestation in Johannesburg. Also, we'll re-stimulate the Dagga debate and want your input. So at SABC Newsroom is where you can send your views on the Dagga debate today. We start with political parties and we host the Dagga party, quite apt first. Also a little bit later, Paul Manari will be in to come and talk to us about the sandstorms and the weird weather that we saw, not just in Johannesburg, around the entire country in the last week or so. But first, let's get the day's news with Katrine Milan.
Well, hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Katrine Milan, and let's take a look at those top stories this morning. The Department of Correctional Services has denied reports that it had already prepared a cell for Paralympian Oscar Pistorius at the Kgosi Mampuru II prison. Spokesperson Tunzi Maha says any insinuation that the department has prepared a cell to detain anyone who has not yet been sentenced to a jail term is both malicious and irresponsible. This follows reports that a cell had already been prepared for Pistorius at the prison in the same section that housed Czech fugitive Radovan Krejcir. Pistorius will be sentenced tomorrow. On to the other high-profile case this week. British businessman Shreen Devani's trial will resume in the Western Cape High Court today. Devani is accused of masterminding the murder of his wife Annie during their honeymoon in Cape Town in November 2010. One of his alleged accomplices, Xolile Mngeni, who was serving life in jail for pulling the trigger, died on Saturday in a Cape Town prison hospital. Parliament's Powers and Privileges Committee will resume disciplinary proceedings against 20 EFF MPs, including party leader Julius Malema today. They face charges of disrupting and displaying contempt for the National Assembly after shouting "pay back the money" at President Jacob Zuma. Earlier this month, the EFF failed to get an urgent interdict to stop the process after claiming that the committee was likely to be biased because of the majority of its members were from the ANC. Moving up in Africa, Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf has written a heartfelt letter to the world over the Ebola crisis in her country, calling on the international community to stop all theoretical explanations and rather to act faster. In the letter, she also likened the Ebola epidemic to the civil war her country faced 11 years ago. The latest World Health Organization figures show the outbreak in West Africa has killed more than 4,500 people across Liberia, Guinea and Sierra Leone. A wave of violence hours after Nigeria's government announced a truce with Boko Haram raised doubt yesterday about whether more than 200 schoolgirls kidnapped by Islamist militants will be released. The ceasefire was announced on Friday to enable the release of the girls who were abducted from the northeastern village of Chibok in April this year. But Boko Haram has not confirmed the truce, and there have been reports of at least 5 attacks since. And the leaders of Mozambique's opposition parties are rejecting early election results, which show victory for ruling party Frelimo. Provisional results released by the country's electoral commission show that Frelimo's candidate, Filipe Nyusi, leads with 62% of the votes that have been counted. Remember, all those top stories and more are available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Katrine. Now, since 1998, over 83,000 owls have been released in various parts of Gauteng to fight the problem of rat infestation. But in Alexandra Township, these animals are now being killed and decapitated because the community is apparently afraid of them. It's been reported that in some cases the birds' eyes have been gouged out and their legs cut off with scissors. A case of animal cruelty has also been opened with the National Council of the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. We are joined this morning in studio by the Owl Rescue Centre's Director, Brendan Murray, who talks to us about this problem. Very good morning to you, Brendan. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the latest. What's the reasoning given for the attacks or the reason why people are killing owls per se.
I just need to correct you on the 83,000. That if you check the media reports, it wasn't 83,000 owls. It was the education that a company is doing there. That it was 83,000 school kids have been educated about owls. The real amount of owls that have been released there's stories of between 16 and 300 owls. You're not quite sure. On a radio interview the other day, they said 16 owls. On their Facebook, they say 30 owls. Another one, they say 300 owls. So we're not exactly sure of how many owls have been released.
Yeah.
The Citizen broke that story on Monday. They contacted us about another story that we had posted there. And the complaint was, the issue was how many owls are actually being killed in Alexander. Sorry, Ivan. And what we said is that we, on a regular basis, go to Alexander plus other informal settlements. And what we do is we collect owls. We're not an organization that specifically collects dead owls. We're out there to rescue live owls. And they broke the story about an owl that was decapitated.
Yeah.
That happened, it was actually a while ago. I checked in the photographs. It actually happened in March this year, an owl that was decapitated. It's not, I mean, I think a lot of people get, owl was decapitated. The guy was concerned, you know, there's cultural beliefs in Alexander and other areas like that owls are linked to witchcraft and bring death. The guy saw the owl, he hit it with a piece of reinforcing, and unfortunately the head came off. We get owls where the guys hit them and legs or wings come off, you see. So it's not like the guy took the owl and physically, you know,
removed the head.
Removed the head, yeah. So, you know, we looked at it, and I looked at our records. We've collected in the last year and a half, we've collected about 7 owls, dead owls that were killed in Alexander, specifically Alexander. Our concern is with the project of where they release the owls in Alexander and how those owls are kept. And we've heard now reports. We've actually got the Joburg Zoo is backing us as well. They did the education program with the school that actually participated in this project. And the teachers said that those owls that were released, they were actually, before they were released, the students actually killed them. In 16th of September last month, there was an owl that the kids, we're not sure how they cut the legs off, but the SPCA handled the case. Unfortunately, the SPCA denied it, but the NSPCA actually confirmed us that the owl actually did go to the SPCA in Sandton, yeah.
Well, we asked the question, could this problem not have been prevented? Now, a few weeks ago, we asked the city's Director of Environmental Health exactly how they're planning on dealing with superstitious beliefs, and this is what they had to say back then.
I was in Alexandra myself a while ago, and I spoke to a community member who also told me about the owls in Alexandra helping to fight these rats. He also, however, told me that the people in the township are afraid of the owls and that there's some superstition behind it as well. How are you dealing with factors like that?
Yeah. Before we introduced owls, we went on an extensive, information campaign, educating people, working together with Siakona project as well as Eco Solutions. That's just to, address the issues of, superstitions and what people believe and don't believe as far as owls are concerned. So it wasn't just an abrupt introduction of owls, but the community dialogues, community meetings, and you still have today, people who still, believe that owls brings bad luck, and then owls are, a sign of bad omen. But our approach has been, working with both, the senior citizens in Alexander as well as school children, and we are bearing fruit in terms of what we see in terms of schools, because when we teach these kids at a young age, we are able to reverse some of the beliefs that, the older members of society, still hold.
That was on the 3rd of October of earlier this month when we spoke to the city. That's their view. I wanted to ask you, how do you view the release of owls into these communities where they're not really welcomed?
They're not welcomed. If you go into Alexander, there's no owls naturally breeding in Alexander. Owls, if you go to an industrial area or farming area, you will find because it's specifically barn owls that we're talking about. If you go into those areas, you will find, like an industrial area where barn owls want to live, they'll live there. In Alexander, there's not naturally where they want to. They're bringing barn owls in there because they've got a rat plague. Barn owls are not going to control a rat plague. Barn owls do eat rats, but they cannot control a rat plague. There's no natural nesting sites for them in Alexander. Unfortunately, just the dynamics of how Alexander works. The outlying areas, all the industrial areas, that's where owls would naturally breed. Yeah. The owls that we've fetched in Alexander, the dead ones, are coming from those industrial areas. These guys catch them because they're in a workshop or a warehouse, and they bring those owls back there because they think there's a money value to them. So they see maybe we can sell it to to Muti or somebody will buy it. There's value attached to that owl. Yeah, but naturally, no owls breeding in Alexander.
That brings us to the next question: African problems, African solutions for African problems. If communities are afraid of certain animals, sure, it's disingenuous then to put those animals in those areas. As is the case with owls now, they're going to be targeted, they're going to be killed.
Yes.
Should we not come up with other scenarios to deal with the rat infestation problem? There have been successful programs in the past in Alexander with rat boxes. People were paid to catch rats and that sort of thing. Is that not a way to deal with it, maybe?
You know, if you look, I've spoken to many experts on rats, and they say they've tried. I spoke to somebody out from the town council the other day, and they put 100 tons of poison inside them. And they say you can drive around for the next week and you're just going to see dead rats. But you take that area, now let's say an area like Alexander can hold, for instance, 1 billion rats. If you kill 2 or 3 million rats, within a couple of weeks, the level is back to 1 billion. So you can keep pumping poison, you can do whatever, you can even catch rats. You're going to catch, but you're never going to catch all those rats. They're just going to multiply and back to a sustainable level, what Alexander can hold. Those people need to be educated on, if there's no available food, rats cannot live there. So that's what they've got to do cleanups, and they've got to educate the people that what not to do to get rats there. Yeah.
So the best solution to deal with the rat infestation is to make sure there's no rubbish on the streets and make sure that the streets are clean and there's no food sources for them.
That's exactly what it is. Like I said, barn owls, you're sacrificing an owl's life. Because what they do is they're punching it as an education program. And we can understand the benefit of education. We can understand that.
Yeah.
But you cannot risk an owl's life. You cannot send them to be slaughtered for the sake of education.
Do the communities believe that these owls are linked to witchcraft and that they even have to be killed in a certain way, or is that just taking it too far?
No, I think that's taking it too far. They just want that, they don't want the owls. Not everybody, but a large portion of their population don't want owls there. Even the ones that have no issue with the owls. If they have an owl, I mean, not in Alexander, but in other areas that we've dealt with, if an owl moves into somebody's house, they scared their family is going to associate them with witchcraft because they now have an owl. Why did the owl choose your house? And we get so many calls, people saying, please come remove these owls. I have nothing against the owls, but I'm scared what people are going to perceive me as.
I want to talk about the owls. You say that these owls there's no chance of them dealing with the thousands and thousands of rats that live in the sewers and so forth.
Yeah.
Where do these owls come from that have been placed in these townships?
What they do is they come from a rehab center. So a rehab center, that member of the public take an owl to a rehab center because most of them are juvenile owls. Nature of the owls is because where they come from, where they live, they fall out there. They don't have proper nesting facilities. They fall out, people bring them to a rehab center. That rehab center then passes them to Eco Solutions. Eco Solutions sells them into an owl project. Not only Alex, individuals, companies can also buy owls from them. You buy the box and the owls come with it. Yeah. So that's where the owls are coming from.
Well, that's very interesting. You say, though, there are other methods. The best ones, you say, is to keep the neighborhoods clean.
Housekeeping is paramount, yes.
Well, Brendan, thank you for joining us today. Brendan Murray is the Owl Rescue Centre's director, and he gives us a unique insight into how owls will not deal with the rat problem we have in the city. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Well, very, very interesting, isn't it? The owls will not sort out the rat problem. We have to keep our streets and our communities clean and make sure that there are no food sources for the rats, because that is what will keep them in our community. Moving on, it's all about matric exams this morning, and on social media sites as the class of 2014 starts the final stretch of their high school years. Let's just take a quick look at what you say on social media. Of course, at SABC Newsroom, that's where you can send us your bits. Mr. Ngobeni says, all the best to the class of 2014. Yes, we are starting to prepare for that class. Tahira says, socially unavailable for the next month because of exams. Tereshni Governor says, late nights, early morning. If you have late nights and early mornings, Tereshni, it means you haven't prepared properly in a good time for the exams. That's the facts. Siddhant Palaka says, when staring at the wall suddenly becomes more interesting than studying. That's right. Your studying should be well up to date by now. If you haven't prepared properly, I've legit studied for the time I woke up today until probably 2 a.m. this morning. Brain overload. Well, it's not going to help if you try and cram in all the information right at the last minute. Of course, the 2014 Grade 12 examinations are just a week away. With more than 600,000 matrics registered to write examinations, we'll find out next Monday if the time and effort they put into the last 12 years of their school life will eventually pay off. This year, examinations will take place in more than 8,100 examination centres all across the country, and like every other year, various preparations have been put in place to ensure the country's readiness for the exams. Now, to tell us a little bit more, we're joined here in studio by the Department of Basic Education's Elijah Mhlanga. Very good morning, Elijah. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, Eben.
Always nice to have you here with us at Newsroom, but this is a particularly exciting and nervy time of the year. Is it all systems go for next week? Everything in order?
Yeah, everything is in order, but let's remember that there's 43,000 learners who are writing today the computer applications paper, and tomorrow they are writing information technology, and tomorrow it will be about 3,000 of them. So already, the examinations have started, although today and tomorrow is practical, but the big starting day is next week or on Monday. Our systems are ready. We are going to receive all these candidates in 6,735 examination centers across the country.
Now, it seems, Elijah, it's a very difficult logistical scenario to pull off. Every year, there seem to be similar problems. How has the department prepared differently this year to avoid or to deal with those similar types of problems that crop up every year, indeed, when it comes to end-of-year exams for matrics?
No, we've put extra measures to ensure that the system runs smoothly. There are many things that you need to prepare for when you work on examinations. There's logistics, there's security, there's the human capacity as well, because it's a massive system. At the end of the examinations, we'll have about 7 million scripts that will have been collected from learners. And there's about 258 different question papers. And the learners are 688,660. That's a big number across the country. So it takes massive planning. That's why we plan 18 months in advance. So for us, this is the culmination of all that planning.
Concerns. What are some of the concerns that the department hopes won't come up, and what are some of the big concerns that could be stumbling blocks over the next couple of weeks?
Well, it's the issue of the weather, because there are some schools, particularly in the rural areas, where when it rains, it becomes impossible to reach them. But with that, we work with the Department of Defense. The National Defense Force helps us with their vehicles, and the SAPS have also availed their helicopters. If there's a need for us to transport scripts using that type of transport, they've made those available. And, also for learners reaching school when it rains, it becomes difficult for them, because sometimes we are forced to delay exams by 30 minutes or so in order for them to settle down and prepare themselves, because they need to be physically fit and mentally fit and ready for them to sit in the examination. So if psychologically something has affected you and is beyond your control, we need to take that into account. But we make sure that everything goes according to plan. We also learn from previous experience that, we ensure that the profile and the integrity of the examination itself is not affected by any negative issues that might arise.
Now, whether it's right or wrong, here in South Africa, the schooling system is judged by the matric pass results every year. I don't subscribe to that. I think it's fundamentally flawed. We need to look at it a little bit differently. How do you guys see it? What's the route going forward? And do you think the matric pass rate will once again be better this year than previous years?
Two things. The first one is that in this term, we're focusing on quality and efficiency. We want quality. we are not looking at the pass rate as a big thing. You see, remember, we're already at 80% now, and 100% is not that far. So if we keep on chasing the number, we might reach 100% very soon, but what about the quality that we are registering? We need to make sure that we focus on the quality. How many bachelors, how many girls are passing mathematics and science, how many boys are passing, and how many of those learners are going to university, and how are they doing while they are there? They need to be fully prepared. So we are looking at the quality of the passes that we are receiving. But in terms of the pass rate, I mean, we are not really worried about that. I think that any improvement from the side of the department will do, but even if the results remain the same, we'll be happy if there's an improvement in terms of the quality of the passes.
Elijah, what about the provinces who are now competing with each other for the highest pass rate? It's almost, if you're the lowest pass rate, you've failed. You've had a terrible year, even if it's above 70%.
I think the competition is good because it pushes everyone to perform better and do well. What we've seen is that you've seen rural provinces beginning to overtake some of the urban provinces like Western Cape and Gauteng. You've seen Northwest and Free State taking the top positions, which is good. It means that the gap between rural and urban schooling is closing, but also the efforts that the different provinces and districts are putting to ensuring that the learners register an improvement is working. Because if you look around, all the provinces have taken their learners to camps where they're preparing. So everyone is going through the same setup where they're preparing for the examinations. We have recruited and invited specialists in different subjects to come and help our learners and also help our teachers with those areas where they've been struggling to ensure that they prepare the learners for the examination. So we think that those interventions are beginning to bridge the gap between the haves and the have-not in terms of the resources in urban and rural settings.
Finally, Elijah, tell us, what's the advice that you guys at the department are giving to the parents of grade 12 students at this time? And then also, what's the message that you're giving to the learners themselves as they go into final exams?
To the parents, we appeal to them to allow the learners to study, to focus. It's been a long 12 years for some of them. We appeal to them to refrain from giving them too much work that will exhaust them physically, so that they're unable to prepare. So they need to rest, they need to eat healthy and exercise, study and time themselves, take enough breaks, make sure that they absorb as much as they can and remember as much as they can. But for the learners themselves, time management is very important. If you know that there's an area where you're struggling, the teachers are still available in those camps. Those specialists and those teachers are still available. Ask for help, get the necessary assistance that you need before the examinations. Staying overnight to study will not assist you. You must make sure that you plan properly, ask for help. Some of your colleagues probably know a little bit more than you do. Ask for assistance, they will help you as well, even outside the school environment.
Well, Elijah, thank you very much for joining us. That's a view from the National Department of Basic Education, is that you are not going to pass if you study overnight. And the parents, please don't give your children extra hard work while they're writing matric exams. So don't ask them to do the washing or to cleaning, whatever. They've got to study for exams this one time in their life. Thank you for joining us and giving us a very insightful view ahead of this very busy period for you guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, let's take a look now at the front pages from around the globe. Let's go global a little bit now. In the United Kingdom, the Independent, as you can see, there's a picture of bishops attending Mass there as the Vatican Synod on the Family closed yesterday. The Synod saw an attempt by Pope Francis to change his church's policy towards gay people. Then in the United States, the Miami Herald is looking at Ebola fears spurring Latin and Caribbean travel bans. This as the deadly virus has claimed more than 4,000 lives now. Then we go to the Far East, where the South China Morning Post has a picture of some of the 30,000 runners who braved the choking smog that again blanketed the capital in an international marathon in Beijing yesterday. Now, we here at Newsroom recently stumbled across this video on YouTube, and, well, we hoped that your week will be just as productive as these two gentlemen. Just have a quick look.
in this blaring day sun. No way.
Are criticizing these two gentlemen for not being productive. I can tell you they're being very productive. The gentleman is using the wheelbarrow as measurement. That's why it's not being lazy. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Now, a few months ago, the team behind Newsroom started what has now become known as the so-called Dagga debate, asking the question, should marijuana be legalized here in South Africa? We were approached firstly by the concerned youth of Southern Africa who wanted to go head-to-head with marijuana lobby group Below the Line. And what followed was a debate that spread like wildfire on all social media sites, went global really. Since then, we've been approached by numerous lobby groups, concerned doctors and experts who all wanted to have their say on the matter. After having them all on the show, we've decided it was now time for it to take a political turn and invite some of our country's most influential political parties to come and have their say. Now, this week, they'll be joining us one by one every day of the week to have their say. Starting today with Jeremy Acton, the leader of the Dagga Party of South Africa. We thought it would only be apt to start with the Dagga Party. Good morning, Jeremy. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Eben. Thank you.
Jeremy, tell us about your engagement as the Dagga Party, firstly, with other political parties and how they've responded to this question.
Well, one of our members who's actually been on your show before, Mr. William Wallace from Below the Line, who's a supporter of the party, wrote to Mrs. Ziller to inquire about the DA standpoint on Dagga and gave motivations for legalization and asked for a public reply. And we got a deafening silence. So the Dagga culture of South Africa is wondering what the DA position is. And then Mr. Mark Wiley, community safety spokesman for the DA in the Western Cape, recently has been taken to court by a Rastafarian grouping for equating Dagga use with criminals and especially linking the Rastafarian community with criminal behavior.
So that's a case that's pending. So the engagement with some of the political parties have not been good. In this case, you say that the DA, who are often seen to be taking issues or taking a stand on issues, they have no position on this. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. And if I may go on to the ANC, well, it's well written down in the history and research that the struggle movement used cannabis cultivation in the homelands to fund the struggle. And they used friendly white persons who would transport the cannabis to the urban centres of South Africa to raise the money. But it's very strange that the ANC then, as the struggle movement suddenly turned around on its own growers when it came into power and used the same apartheid helicopters, police and dogs against those people who had supported them in the deep homelands. So the ANC's position on cannabis is very clear over the last 14, 15 years.
Let's talk about the country. Is South Africa ready to legalize marijuana? Is Parliament ready to take this step?
Well, firstly, I think a state mechanism like Parliament, which has presided over the prohibition for literally the last 100 years, is not necessarily the most competent organisation to write legislation on dagga. It should come from the dagga culture and from public consultation. I also think that the government is going to be very unwilling to legalise, because our government is controlled behind the scenes by various corporations and money elites who don't want to see cannabis legal. The reason why it is kept illegal is not because it's a dangerous drug that we must be protected from by means of criminalization, which is a harm in itself. Cannabis is actually an industrial and medical resource. Cannabis provides the most nutritious protein seed on earth, a very useful seed oil. It provides the longest and strongest fibre on earth from a plant. All the sails of the British Navy were made from cannabis. And then once we have extracted the fibres from the stalks of the plant, we're left with a thing called herds, which is like a cellulose material. And we can make petrol and methanol and methane, in other words, energy, from the waste products that come from the inside of the sticks of dagga. And that is one of the most important reasons why dagga was originally made illegal by those corporations that were behind the British Crown in South Africa and also the American federal government in the 1930s.
What about public sentiment?
We could actually...
What about public sentiment? Where are we now with public sentiment? And what do you think? Is it not maybe time for something like a referendum to be put forward and for the people of South Africa to decide on this matter?
Well, I'm a bit concerned that a referendum would be held along party political lines, and those parties that don't support dagga will require their members to vote against such an issue. But remember, we are a cultural minority. The dagga culture is a very organized and legitimate cultural minority, and we're claiming our rights, regardless of whether the rest of South Africa accepts it or not. I think that we have to legalize dagga. It's not a matter of whether we should or we shouldn't. Firstly, recognizing that the propaganda against this plant is there for the vested interests. If we look at the future of our economy, we have a massive unemployment issue. 50% of South Africans go to bed hungry. And we have this resource which will enable us all to participate equitably in a production economy. And when I also say production, instead of just being a consumer, South Africans could be growing petrol. We could reduce the price of petrol in South Africa. We could reduce crimes related to poverty. In countries which have legalized for various reasons, recreational and medical, they noticed that the suicide rate came down. So did traffic accidents. So did domestic and violence and violent crimes. We need those statistics in South Africa. So we have to actually consider that it's not about believing that it's going to be dangerous to our future. It's actually going to be a very big help for a more sustainable South Africa.
Jeremy, finally, we have all the political parties coming in the rest of the week. Now, you say that they've been silent and they've been very difficult for you to interact with them. What are the questions that you want to ask these political parties? We've got the DA confirmed for Wednesday. Do you have a specific question to ask them?
They must provide information about why they think it is illegal, and then they must also explain why we can't use this resource for the various industrial benefits which will accrue to our economy. It would have a massive multiplier effect on the economic situation in South Africa, and legalizing cannabis in the Karoo areas would mean that we don't actually have to frack the Karoo for natural gas. Our farmers could farm gas. As regards the ANC, I just hope that they would hear the pleas of their own voters who use cannabis. This is something that is going to be of great help to South Africa, and on the medical side as well, we should be seeing it in all hospitals for all the ailments that cannabis can treat. And then on the other hand, all citizens should be equitably allowed to participate in a cannabis economy. And equitable production of cannabis means equitable access to land in South Africa, which is something that the political parties make a lot of hot air about. But I don't see the change when it comes to land access. We're sitting in ghettos with prohibition. Well, let's rather move young South Africans out into the rural areas and give them this resource to create a future.
Jeremy Acton of the Dagga Party of South Africa, thank you for joining us today. This as we continue our Dagga debates. It's been going on now on this very show since the middle of July. This week we're going to be entertaining the views of all the political parties in South Africa. We have the IFP confirmed for tomorrow, and thereafter that will be followed by the DA on Wednesday, and so forth for the rest of the week. So if you have any questions, if you have any views, please send them to us at SABC Newsroom. That's where we want you to interact with us, at SABC Newsroom on Twitter. Of course, the site where we live is SABC News. There you see it, .co.za/news. That's where you can get all the latest updates from all around the world all the time. Let's take a quick look at what you're talking about right now. Of course, Srindavani is back in the dock today. Medical parole is the buzzing word, and late Kolili Mgeni, of course, Kolili Mgeni passed away over the weekend. That puts a spanner in the works of that case. Wamputi says, legal matters confuses me. Kolili Mgeni, Oscar Pistorius, Modimoli Monster have all taken someone's life. Law labels this act differently. Alok says, this whole Kolili Mgeni situation makes me want to raise a couple of questions. Feel free to do so. Send them back to us at SABC Newsroom. Miriam says, so Kolili Mgeni had terminal brain cancer and the signatures of 11 doctors to waiver his sentence on compassionate leave, but was denied. Mzana says, he killed, yes, but he was dying. Clearly because he's now dead. What purpose keeping him in jail? For what was it going to achieve? Talks about Kolili Mgeni. What about the person that was killed in this case? What about their families? That's always the things that we have to keep foremost on our minds. Now let's take a look at what's happening on our Newsroom Facebook page on this Monday morning today. You will see there that the Democratic Alliance has challenged President Jacob Zuma to reject the offer that a KwaZulu-Natal businessman has made to pay back a portion of the money that was spent on security upgrades at his Nkandla residence. Then election preparations are in full swing in Botswana, as over 800,000 in that country have registered to vote in the 11th general elections to be held this coming Friday. Of course, the Srindavani murder trial resumes in the Western Cape High Court this morning, with the state calling its 7th witness. You can find all of that and a whole lot more on the Facebook page that you've seen. Just in the search bar, type in Newsroom, SABC. That's where you'll find it, of course. Visit sabc.co.za/news for all the latest news. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. There you see it. We'll be back after a short little break.
SABC News, we've got Africa covered.
This former breadbasket of Africa, playing host to SADC leaders.
I feel humbled and yet greatly honored at being appointed the chairman of SADC.
When I was a student, Harvard was only my visible college, my formal classes. But I was also a student in an invisible college.
The outbreak in West Africa is the world's deadliest to date. It's centered on Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, with cases also reported in Nigeria.
Catch news at 8, 7 days a week. Be informed.
Hello and welcome back to Newsroom. Let's take a look at the top stories this morning. The Department of Correctional Services has denied reports that it had already prepared a cell for Paralympian Oscar Pistorius at the Kgosi Mampuru II prison. Spokesperson Mthunzi Maga says any insinuation that the department has prepared a cell to detain anyone who has not yet been sentenced to a jail term is both malicious and irresponsible. This follows reports that a cell had already been prepared for Pistorius at the prison in the same section that housed Czech fugitive Radovan Krejcir. Pistorius will be sentenced tomorrow. On to the other high-profile case this week. British businessman Shreen Devani's trial will resume in the Western Cape High Court today. Devani is accused of masterminding the murder of his wife Annie during the honeymoon in Cape Town in November 2010. One of his alleged accomplices, Nkulile Mngeni, who was serving life in jail for pulling the trigger, died on Saturday in a Cape Town prison hospital. And Parliament's Powers and Privileges Committee will resume disciplinary proceedings against 20 EFF MPs, including party leader Julius Malema, today. They face charges of disrupting and displaying contempt for the National Assembly after shouting back at pay back the money at President Jacob Zuma. Earlier this month, the EFF failed to get an urgent interdict to stop the process after claiming that the committee was likely to be biased because of the majority of its members were from the ANC. Remember, all these top stories and more are available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, over to you.
Thank you very much, Katrine. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we've seen some strange and even scary headlines in the media. Among these strange phenomena of late, the sandstorms from the Northern Cape and the brutal killing that we reported on earlier of owls here in Gauteng. Now, here to talk to us about all of this and more is our weather guru, meteorologist, Mr. Greenfingers, jack of all trades, Paul Monaro. Good morning, Paul.
Very good morning, Evan.
Fantastic to have you with us again. I saw some of the pictures of the sandstorm last week. I want to start there. The sandstorm, that was amazing. Just give us the official rundown. What happened?
Yeah, well, basically, we have, it's a thunderstorm season now, and what happens during a thunderstorm? So one of the systems that take place during a thunderstorm is a downdraft, which is just downpouring of wind, basically. That's exactly what it is. And last week, we had a very strong one over the central part of the country, and that's what picked up these loose sand particles over the Northern Cape province, and it created a sandstorm in places such as Kimberley. If you're in Bloemfontein, people saw that. There were lots of pictures coming in. Yeah, have a look at that.
There were some of the amazing pictures that people sent in on Twitter. Yeah. It looked almost like the kind of thing you see in the Sahara Desert.
Exactly.
That sort of thing. Very, very beautiful pictures, but must be quite scary to be in the middle of it. When last have we seen such a thing in this country, or have we ever seen it?
Yeah, I think we've had a sandstorm before. It's not the first day. In places such as the Northern Cape, it's quite a dry place, and there is quite some sand there, and it does get windy. So, last week's one was quite hectic because it happened so quickly and nobody really expected it. We were expecting some thunderstorms over some part of the Eastern Cape province as well as into KwaZulu-Natal. And yes, of course, we did get those, but the winds over the interior, that's what picked up the sand and it blew all the way into Gauteng as well as over the Free State province. And what we're experiencing in Gauteng was more of a dust storm, not really much of a sandstorm.
No, it was just dust all over. I mean, you know, everything at home was covered in dust as it came
and
over.
People with contact lenses were complaining, you know, because it was getting into their eyes and it was really serious.
Yeah, all those were the sinus problems as well. I wanted to ask you, though, about the rain in Johannesburg. We're now getting towards the end of October, and we haven't really seen the rain yet.
Yeah.
When is the rain coming, Paul? Are you going to do a rain dance and tell us it's coming next week, or when is the rain coming?
Yeah, it's a little bit late in terms of, you know, looking at the thunderstorms and so on. But there is a forecast of, you know, up to 30% chance of showers tomorrow. So, you know, the rain could be
I've seen that 30% chance for the last 2 weeks, Paul.
Yeah, well, 30% chance means 70% chance of no rain.
Why don't you say then 70% chance of no rain tomorrow? Maybe we'll understand it a little bit better.
No. We have to give you the good side of it, you know, what it looks like. It does look like we're going to get those thunderstorms. And yes, they're supposed to have hit already. But we did receive some rainfall, especially in KwaZulu-Natal, some part of Mpumalanga. Even as we speak, there is a chance of rainfall in Mpumalanga, so it's still there.
We had a couple of heavy hailstorms here in Johannesburg about 3 weeks ago, and I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. I wanted to ask you, because it's so dry, and because we haven't seen rain, and the downdrafts, is that why we saw the sandstorm as well? Sort of a perfect storm must come together for this to happen.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that's pretty much what happened. It was a cut-off low last week. Last week there was a cold front right in the middle of October. You know, it's not supposed to be happening. But it just happened. It just took place. And that cut-off low is what led to the rainfall going all the way towards the East Coast, into KwaZulu-Natal and so forth. But it is building up. You know, the build-up is there. We've seen some showers here and there. We've seen some severe rain and then stopping again. So that's just basically the build-up. And that's that one word or those two words that we don't want to bring in, which is climate change. And it is having a big impact. And that's why everything is taking place at its different time or at its own time as it's happening.
Now, Paul, we know that you're a nature lover and an animal lover. We spoke about the killing of owls here, the superstition scenarios that plays out here in Johannesburg. What's your take on, firstly, the owls wanting to use owls to deal with a rat infestation, which I think in itself is insanity, and then the things that's played out of it? What do you make of it?
Well, for me, I thought it looks like an educational aspect. I mean, if you look at how ecology works, you know, there's predators and there's prey and all of that. So owls make sense that they would get rid of the rats. But if you think about it, there's a lot of rats in Alexander. And, you know, you can't bring in 400 or, I don't know, 30
Less
owls.
than 300 owls.
Yeah, you can't bring those to come deal. Because rats will sort of, you know, regenerate again. You know, more rats will be born.
Almost immediately.
Yes, because of the conditions in Alexander as well. I mean, if you think about it, people just throwing plastic bags and food particles all over the place. And it's quite crammed up. So those are actually good, pristine conditions for rats to thrive. And where will you host the owls when you put them in Alexander? The habitat is not right for them there. And of course, people don't really like owls because of, you know, they look weird and they're associated with lots of
witchcraft and bad spirits and all that sort of stuff.
It's not only in South Africa. I mean, if you think all over the world, if you think about the Kikuyu in Kenya, they see owls as bad omen bringing death. You know, if you think about the Swahili people in East Africa, they think owls bring illness to children and so forth. And
so we should have African solutions for African problems and not freak people out by putting owls on their doorstep, but maybe pay them to catch the rats or maybe get them to clean up the streets so that they're not food sources.
Yeah, look, rodents are quite of an odd one. I mean, it's not easy to get 100 people to come through and say, okay, we'll catch those rats. I mean, how many people here in the SABC would want to catch a rat? You know, think about that. But if you teach people, let people know that, you know what, this is what's going to lead, just like cockroaches in your house. If you don't clean your dishes, if you don't clean your house, you will have cockroaches. So if you teach people that clean yourself, you know, clean your streets and clean your homes, don't litter like that, then you can minimize the situation with rats. Otherwise, you get somebody playing the flute and whisking the rats.
That's not going to happen, Paul. That's not going to happen. We got the man playing the flute to lead the rats up. Before we go, though, Paul, I wanted to ask you, you know, we have some passionate debate around the legalization of marijuana in South Africa. What are your views on that? And if we had to legalize it, would marijuana be the kind of cash crop that could bring us fuel, that could bring us all the things that they say it could bring?
Yeah, this is one situation which is a bit of a catch-22 for the government. I can imagine the policymakers are sitting there thinking, this thing has so many benefits, a lot of them, like the fuel, like exports that we can send out, because we can really grow it, and some of the medical research that can be done. We've got some really smart people who have really good ideas and that can actually cure a lot of things, like the cancer and so forth. But then again, there's one major issue, the substance abuse. It might get really, really abused. The controlling of it might get really difficult. So on my side, I would say, if we're going to be super strict on it, very strict on how it's used and how the research is going to go about, and if it's really going to be managed, I would say, yes, let's go on and let's do the research and get it out there. But then again, even we really need to watch it carefully, because we know a lot of people will be.
It's like anything. It's like monitoring anything. You don't stop selling guns and knives because people use them.
Yeah.
You have to educate people to not kill each other, and that starts at home, really. But if you were a cannabis farmer, where would you want to? What part of the country would you want to be in?
That's the thing about cannabis. It grows anywhere. We can grow it here in the studio. We can have a couple of pots. I think we should do that, actually.
No, we're going to get
how long
fired
it takes to grow.
It's not legal yet.
No, I'm kidding. But the thing about it, it's so easy to grow. It grows on almost any soil. So if you're here in Gauteng, really good for you. Just make sure it doesn't get too much sun. Maybe I shouldn't be giving out all these tips. But from a zoological point of view and a botanical point of view, I'm just speaking from a scientist's perspective here, is that, keep it out of too much sunlight, make sure it's well ventilated and just about any soil. Northern Cape, I wouldn't be there because it gets too hot, but, think about KwaZulu-Natal, Free State and Gauteng. That's where I would live if I wanted to plant.
If you wanted to have a farm, well, there you go, Paul Monare, as always, giving us wonderful insight into how the planet is responding to us as human beings. Climate change is a real concern. He always tells us about that. And if you've got a problem with rats in your community, talk to community leaders and tell them, let's clean up the community. Let's make there's not a big enough food source for all of them. And if you are worried about the dust storm that we have on the big screen here behind me now, that is something that doesn't happen all the time here in South Africa, as Paul pointed out to us. Thanks. Thank you, Paul, for joining us. As always, Paul will be back a little bit later this week and give us more insight into your concerns around the weather. Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show repeats at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following morning. We also stream live on YouTube at that time, with the entire show available on demand on our YouTube channel. Look at those beautiful pictures from you, the viewer at home, about the dust storm that you've seen. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.